Hi, Hayley.
Hello. How are you, Alison?
I'm great. Nice to see you finally. I mean, we've been in touch, and of course, everyone knows you in the female motorcycling world. You're not to be introduced anymore. So I feel super special and very grateful to spend this time with you one-on-one and for you to give me some time in your very busy schedule. So thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Huh?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure. So let's go deep into the topic because, as I said, everyone knows you already, and there's always one question that I ask myself when I saw what you do with the Women Riders World Relay and so on. I thought it was around showing that there was a huge women's market and that there was a underrepresentation and that we needed better gear and so on. But then I realized, and I read, a few of your posts and the article, but I realized that really the trigger initially was you went back, you were coming back from traveling and you took your riding license and you wanted to ride with women. You wanted just to find a crowd of, women to ride with, which is actually a very, very common need for many of us. So my first question was, after you organized the WRWR, now with the feedback, what was the biggest impact on your personal life and on your riding habit and on your female riding community?
That's a good question. It's probably one of the better questions I've been asked in an interview before. In terms of the sort of personal things, I think WRWR massively changed my perspectives on a lot of things. It's given me a really good wholesome understanding of different cultures, like across 100 different countries. So to have access to and be sort of really immersed into so many different cultures and ways of being and, communities and how people interact with each other in different countries and all the rest of it is really quite special. And it's really something that I think everybody should be exposed to at some point. It's certainly made me more sort of aware of what's going on around the world, and it's certainly made me more understanding of different things as well. People speak differently. There's obviously differences in like tone of language in different countries and things, but when you start getting into the crux of how communities actually function together and hierarchies in riding groups and things like that in different countries, it's really interesting. So from a personal standpoint, WRWR really really educated me in a lot of ways. That's nothing that you could ever learn in a school, and it's certainly nothing that you can ever take an exam for. It was an education of people across so many different countries, and that has been so valuable to me, and something that I'll never sort of lose sight of. So it's really given me such a worldly perspective, and I love that. Being somebody who really enjoys traveling and things, it's just like it just really feels homely to me, being able to understand different cultures. So that's definitely something that personally affected me with WRWR. And then with my riding, I never thought that I'd ride a bagger, which is the bike that I rode over in the States. These big sort of Indians and Harleys. I never thought I'd ride that because in the UK we have very, very narrow, very twisty, tight roads everywhere, and there's traffic everywhere. So smaller sports bikes, etc., naked bikes are much more common than a huge big bagger, as they call them. So yeah, and I was like, well, I'm gonna have to ride an Indian chieftain, like an Indian dark horse, a big like bagger, like over in the States. And when I rode it, I was like, actually, do you know what? For this country, this is perfect, because it was just like a big armchair. You could just chill out on it and you were comfortable and you had loads of luggage room and all the rest of it. And I was just used to being in a sports bike position all the time, or on an enduro bike or what have you. So
would you actually change bike every time from one country to another?
yeah.
So you travel and then bikes locally?
Yeah, so in the UK here, the bikes that I have, well, the bikes that I had at the time of the relay was I had a KTM 690 Duke, I had a KTM 250 free ride, 2-stroke for enduro riding, and I had a Yamaha R6 for the track, for track riding, as well as a couple of like project bikes, but those 3 were my main 3 bikes. But to ship a bike over to the United States would have cost more than renting a bike, really. So what fortunately I actually got sponsored by Indian in the States, so they lent me an Indian dark horse to Chieftain dark horse to ride across the States in, which was brilliant. And then when I went to the UAE, KTM sponsored me, which was fantastic. So I got a KTM 790 Duke, so like the next generation of the one that I had at home to go and take out and ride the UAE with. So that was fantastic. It was a brilliant experience in both countries, and completely different perspective. So like you've got a very westernized United States, very sort of similar culture, though not entirely the same by any stretch of the imagination, but a very similar culture to the UK. And then the UAE, completely different culture to the UK. Yeah, and now we were meeting girls coming in from Oman and, you know, wherever, like all the sort of surrounding Saudi, you know, all these surrounding places and things, which was amazing. And just getting to talk to them and understand what it meant to be a female rider in their country is really, really important to me. When I set up WRWR, it was from a westernized point of view. So there are issues within the UK and Europe relating to stereotypes and female riders and all the rest of it, and gear and all the rest of it. But when you start talking to countries where it's illegal for a woman to ride a motorcycle, or, you know, they're getting spat at because they are doing, or, you know, they've got absolutely no gear, etc., that then just makes that movement all the more important. And it just really sort of brings the world together, and it's much more wholesome to and humbling to think what we did, really. So yeah, my riding's not really developed. I mean, you know, again, so we're riding in big groups. Group riding isn't something that I ever used to do before WRWR. Never used to do it. The only time that I would ever ride in a group on my motorcycle was if we were doing a protest. So if somebody was trying to shut down a motorcycle place, or if we were doing a ride for charity. So we'd go to the children's hospitals and give them presents at Christmas and things, and we'd all dress our bikes up like Santa Claus and put tinsel and everything all over us. So those were the only group rides that I did. I was very much a solo rider. So WRWR certainly taught me the value in group riding, actually. It's not something that I'd ever, because my helmet time was my helmet time, it was my alone time, and that's why I loved it. And at the thoughts previously of riding with a group, when this is the time that I don't want to speak to people, this is the time that I want to put my helmet on and shut away from the world and, you know, go within myself, the thought of riding in a group was like, nah. And then when I did, I was like, oh, actually, this is actually really nice, because when you stop, you can, you know, you've got people to talk to and you can share the experience with people and all the rest of it. So it really opened my riding up to group riding as well.
Okay, so that's a very interesting impact. You're right. I'm personally, I'm always been used to riding in groups, but yeah, I really see the values in both, honestly. Like I really love just a different mindset or different places you go. But so yeah, but that makes me think. You also mentioned in articles that you wanted to ride with a group, and that's but not necessarily guys. buddies. So I
Yeah.
want to ask you as well, what was the difference for you? Because again, me coming from a Western country, my experience
Mhm.
was boys or men or women, it doesn't matter, because I was riding with my father since I was a kid, my mom rides, and
Yeah.
Harley Club, we would just ride with. I never even questioned it, who I wanted
Yeah.
to. When I came to Asia, it was a whole different game. And I
Yeah.
discovered the pleasure of riding with women in Malaysia. So I was wondering for you, since you didn't even have any really group riding experience, and I mean, you're quite a strong woman. I don't think you're really intimidated by guys. So, what kind of push you? What did you feel like riding with women more particularly? And during the WRWR, did you learn anything or did you experience anything special that you think it's nicer or better or different to ride only with women?
Yeah, there was loads. So something that happens, and don't get me wrong, though I didn't choose to ride with groups often, I did ride with groups, before WRWR. Naturally, we had, a group of friends that we'd go out at the weekend and what have you, but I'd never really ride in big groups, 30 plus or what have you. Something that really, and you're absolutely right. So the groups of people, that the friends that I have in the UK that I ride bikes with are all guys. And two things that are very different about the biggest thing that sort of came out of the experience of WRWR within sharing a group ride with women only was the development that happens through that. So I'll give you a couple of examples. When we were in the US, there was women who we were doing really, really long days. It really was like we were doing 600 miles plus in a day. And we were doing that back to back for 2 weeks straight. It was hard slog. Yeah. And we were riding in temperatures ranging from minus 10 degrees Celsius through to 40 degrees Celsius. And, it was a tough ride. It really was. And there were women that were attending the ride that were really nervous and really had not done this sort of riding before at all. They weren't experienced in a group, they weren't experienced in distance, they weren't even experienced riders at all in some cases. So undoubtedly they had fears around the ride. And every morning, me and Liza Miller, who's the American ambassador and obviously one of our admin team, we'd call in the group and we'd say, right, who's nervous? Who's breaking it? Yeah. And some of them would go, I am, and there'd be a few hands that would go up. And I'd take the nervous ones and I'd be like, right, come on, come with me. We're gonna sort this out. And then we'd sort of split into two sort of groups. So the more experienced riders and whatever would go with Liza, and I'd take the nervous, more cautious ones that were feeling a bit of anxiety. And what I did with them was I would teach them on the road. So at the start, I'd give them a bit of prep about what we were going to do and where we're going to go and where the stops are. And I made sure everybody had the stops in their phones so that if for whatever reason we got lost, there's no need to panic because you know where you're going and blah, blah, blah. And then I'd say like, right, I'm going to like give you little tips. If it was a new rider, I'm going to give you some little tips. Follow my lines. These are the things that I'm going to do. Like these gestures mean this, blah, blah, blah. Follow what I do. And it was amazing because these riders were starting out terribly nervous, really, really uneasy with the situation. And at the end of the day, with these sort of nervous or new riders, at the end of the day, they were absolutely loving it and they'd learnt, and their skills as a rider had significantly progressed in just a day's ride. And it was just because they were with a group of people that they felt comfortable with. There was no pressure. There was no there was nothing to be sort of feel embarrassed about or anything like that. They were at ease. so they were in a comfortable learning environment, and they were loving it. They were absolutely loving it, and we were playing with each other, and we were saying like, right, you two pair up, you two have a bit of a race down there, and and there was a bit of competition going on, and it was just brilliant. So like, I think when you put women together in an environment, and it's not so much women, it's when you put people at the same level together. Obviously, if I go to a track day with Valentino Rossi, I'm going to feel pretty damn nervous and out of my comfort zone. So if I go to a track day with somebody who's of my level, I'm going to feel a bit more confident, and I'm going to be able to reach that goal. Yeah. So it's about putting people together that are of an equal level, and that way you see them progress rather than get disheartened. And that's something that I really saw with WRWR, because we were putting all the women together and they were bouncing off each other and thriving off each other. So it was like one woman would do it, the other women would see that she's done it, so they all went and did it without even thinking. Like, they didn't even stop and think about it. They had no time to stop and think, they just did, and that was the difference. So it was amazing.
It's funny because the other day I organized a little gymkhana competition as well with women riders, and where we were, there were some guys, and there was one of them, you were saying, oh, it's so funny because women, when they compete, they cheer each other. They compete and cheer each other. Guys don't do that, and he made me notice it, and I was like, yes. And I think that's also why I started loving riding with women, because there is this sense of no pressure. It doesn't mean that we don't want to go out of our comfort zone and take corners and be competitive and show our skills or whatever, but there is this of still supporting each other, even especially as we are a smaller community, that we don't necessarily see in other environments where women can tend to be competitive, because we are always a little bit influenced by the male gaze, and by that's
it's nerve-wracking. It's nerve-wracking as hell, if you're I mean, I'm talking about like track riding and things, but if you're on a track and you're the only girl, which I often am, it's nerve-wracking. You've got like all these guys just like watching you because you're the odd one out, if you go on a track day with all girls, different story. You're no longer the oddball. You blend in
completely,
so the pressure's off.
And tell me, so actually I wanted to ask you, what were the biggest challenges that you faced during WRWR? But just before that, I'd like to understand, what was the smallest group and the largest group you had? Because I know as well for a fact that in Asia, you were not huge groups, like when it comes to Nepal or Myanmar. I had interview with some of the ambassadors. So I was curious to know, what was the biggest group, the largest group, and is there anyone who has been to all the countries?
There's nobody that's been to all of the countries now.
Okay.
The smallest group was one person.
Okay.
And that one person rode through monsoons on her own.
I think I cannot hear you anymore. Okay,
yeah.
So let's cut off your back. So we were telling me about the smallest WRWR team of one woman who was riding on her own. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so we had one woman. So the smallest team, you're asking about the smallest and the largest teams. The smallest team we had was one woman. There was several one women teams actually. So one of them in particular was riding through a monsoon on a small capacity bike. She did it all by herself. One of the other girls that was riding solo as well. She rode through several countries where we couldn't get members in. In some countries, because we obviously the nature of putting on an event, it costs money. It costs money to advertise it. It costs money to ship the baton. It costs money to build a website, it costs money to do all these things. And some countries, because we had a price, so for riders who wanted to get the t-shirt and the patch and the sticker, etc., it was 25 UK pounds. And then we also made into consideration countries with different economic climates. So we did a £5 option where that would, you just get a certificate, a digital certificate, rather than getting the merchandise with it as well. So, but because we had a mandatory payment to become a guardian, some countries, the way that they operate is they don't like that. So rather than it being mandatory, they were saying, we're not going to join unless it's voluntary. And we couldn't do that. We couldn't just say, whoever wants to come up, you can pay, but you don't have to. Because when we went to the suppliers that we had to pay, we wouldn't be able to go, well, we might pay, but we might not. So there was some countries that we literally couldn't get women riders to join because they saw WRWR as a bad thing, because we didn't make it an optional requirement to pay. It was a mandatory, you pay this to attend this event, sort of thing. So one woman rode through several countries because of that on her own. So we had quite a few teams of solo riders. In terms of like the biggest group,
this woman who rode through several countries on her own, she was one ambassador of your team, and she just wanted women locally to join. So she did it on her own. And the one who went through monsoon, what country was it?
It was in Laos, but she did do a couple actually. I can't remember which ones she did off the top of my head, but she did do a couple of them. And then so the biggest country, the biggest ones that we had in terms of actual memberships, Australia, UK and the USA were the biggest, and South Africa actually were the biggest membership countries. In terms of the biggest group of actual riders attending, I don't know off the top of my head, but it would probably be a toss-up between the UK, Australia and the USA. I'd have to look at the actual stats of who we had on what days, but it was well into
like the biggest group that rode together of women approximately.
It was well into a couple of hundred riders, together in one group sort of thing. So there was big groups that we were riding with all together. But I don't know all the figures off the top of my head.
That's okay, but just to have an idea. And okay, so in terms of biggest challenges, so you mentioned the fact that some countries didn't want to pay, the logistics, but I'm a bit more interested because I imagine there are so many different challenges, like of organizing, shipping bikes or the permits or finding the people and so on. But like outside the logistic, because it would be easy, the logistic challenges, I think there are too many, but is there any specific challenge?
It's not.
So
go on. Well, the biggest challenge, I can't stress how many there were. First of all, there was a lot of big challenges, and WRWR, in many instances, should have failed. It was impossible in many instances. There were so many big hurdles that we managed to, as a team and as a group, overcome so many times, day in, day out, one after the other, that if you wrote them all down, you'd be like, nah, that never happened. You wouldn't have been able to pull that off, no way. And we did. But one of the, I would say the biggest sort of like overarching challenge that affected everything was the communication, because we were having to constantly communicate with 100 countries in 100 different languages and 100 different time zones, and we're only one person or 5 people in an admin team or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So it was the constant communication troubles that we faced that affected everything as a whole. And it wasn't, so it was, for example, taking a phone call at 4 o'clock in the morning isn't an issue. Taking a phone call at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in the morning every single day and night is an issue. Yeah. Taking those phone calls in languages that you don't speak is an issue. Trying to communicate back in those languages that you don't speak is also an issue.
Translator? Would there be people who
No,
Google Translate?
no, we use Google Translate, and we made do with what we could. This is the issue. So I'm listening to conversations, or I'm messaging on conversations, and I'm trying to frantically Google Translate what they're saying and speak it back or text it back or whatever. And then of course you have language barriers. So we've done all this. We've taken the 50,000 phone calls that are coming through and messages and all the rest of it. And we think we understand what they're saying, and we send what we think is okay back, and they don't understand because we've got it wrong, or they misinterpret it even worse. And because with different languages, there's different ways of speaking with each other. So for example, you know, some European languages are very direct. You do this. Yeah. If I said in England, you do this to somebody, I would be classed as very rude, a rude person.
Yes,
so then
you must have heard, yes, no problem, and nothing gets done.
Exactly. So then you've got like the subculture of a language that you're trying to understand and you've never been accustomed to before, and you're trying to communicate that, and they don't know that you don't understand this, and they don't know that you don't know how to speak this language, or that all they see is a rude message in their language coming back, and they're like, what? And then you're trying to backpedal, and you're like, no, this is what I mean, this is what. So like communication, both in time, language and culture, big issue across 100 countries. Yeah, that's a big challenge.
So I understand a bit. I understood already, to be honest. I could totally imagine, but I also, now that you tell me this was the most difficult part, I understand now even more why at some point you decided after the WRWR to just shut down. Like, because when I see the number of messages, and because I took part myself in the Malaysian one, but when I see the amount of messages and communication and how overwhelming it can be, even when it's interesting, and for you, it was not even only about communicating and promoting what you were doing, but it was also like proper logistic and things like that. Now I understand even better that, you know, you just want to like, leave me alone. I just don't want to talk anymore.
We need a break. It was so like when WRWR was going on, and of course, like everybody wants to know answers all the time, and it doesn't matter how many times you write on a post on Facebook or put information on a website, people have questions. And the thing is everybody has our Facebooks, so all the admins just got hounded, absolutely bombarded. I was through WRWR, in terms of emails, Facebook messages and phone calls, typically on average I was getting about 200, 250 a day. Yeah, and I replied to every single one of them.
That's crazy.
So it was hard work. Yeah. So that was like a big challenge, but that I would say that was the biggest challenge, just because it affected everything. So we had other challenges, like for example, when we got to the Pakistani border, because of the baton had the GPS tracker in it, right? And they thought that this GPS tracker was some kind of spy gadget or a bomb. So they were going to destroy, they were going to blow up with the, with the police and everything over there. They were going to blow up the baton with all the signatures on it that we'd got so far and everything. And the GPS tracker, they were going to destroy it. So, a bit of an issue. So we then have to try and communicate from the UK and around the world with the Pakistani ambassador, Gulef Shantarik, with the police, with the border patrol guys, trying to get across to them that this isn't a bomb and it isn't a tracking device, and trying to help them understand that this is what we're doing. And this is, again, in a country where it's not, in the UK, if you explain we're doing a women's relay, quite easy to understand, yeah, because it's something that, people have done motorcycle relays in the UK before. They've never done women's ones like this, but it's quite an easy concept to understand. But saying that to a country where that's not an easy concept to understand is very difficult, and it sounds like, excuse my French, bullshit. So even more, they were like, no, we're going to destroy this. So again, that's an issue.
Back to communication and cultural differences, and challenges that you have to overcome day in, day out. What's your best memory?
Say again.
It's very difficult to question, because I know you probably have tons. But maybe I was gonna, if you had one best memory to share, what would it be?
Okay, there's literally thousands. But one of the it's not so much the best memory, but it's the memory that really, it was the time when what we were doing really sunk in for me, because we were on this treadmill and we hadn't got off it for 2 years, and we were going and going and going, and we never had time to stop and actually look back at what we'd done and what we were doing. So one of the most memorable moments was when I allowed that to sink in a little bit, and it was in the UAE when I'd gone over there, and Laura Tarabay, who was our UAE ambassador, she's a beautiful woman. She's so inside and out. She's so lovely. And we were behind stage at the Dubai Shopping Festival, where they'd invited us as WRWR to do the closing ceremony, which is a big deal. It's a big deal over there. It's a big festival. And I had to ride my motorbike on stage up this flight of stairs and everything, and we did this big presentation, and we got given awards, and very important people came to congratulate us, and WRWR was made a big deal of, yeah. And behind stage, Lara just grabbed my hand and she looked me dead in the eye and she said, "Do you have any idea what we've done, Hayley? We've changed the world." And she looked at me and she was dead serious, and it was literally just a moment where I was like, Jesus, like, you're right, like, and it just sunk in, and I was like, whoa, like the actual impact of this event and what we've done is making huge changes for the future of women riders. And that was the point that I sort of just stopped and went, oh. And she said it just before I went on stage, and I was crying my eyes out. I was like, you should have told me this afterwards. Now I'm a mess.
So I interviewed as well Lara a few weeks ago, so I have a really cool interview with her as well. And so that makes me think, we talk about impact, and that's a very important thing as well, the strong mission of WRWR. So we talk about the donations. I have questions about the donations, but also in terms of, there was another aspect, at least, that was a bit more promoted in the media, of the reason of WRWR, which was around underrepresentation and around gear, and motorcycle dealers and gear providers not really taking into account a market that, yes, is definitely very, very small, but that's growing a lot and that still needs representation. And I was
Mhm.
wondering now again, yeah, fast forward, do you see now, I mean, during this experience or after, the way that you deal with manufacture, because you talk with, you know, big brands, and I've seen it, the experience myself as well in Asia when I try to talk to brands and so on. And even when you show them the potential of the women riders community and the market and also the business potential and everything, it's still not tangible. And I was wondering whether back in Europe, where at least I think it's a bit more tangible now, Europe, USA, and so on, did you see any tangible changes, the way that they talk to you, the way that you manage to get what you want, or sponsorships or partnerships, or in terms of, have you seen any changes? Have you seen any impact already?
There's been a lot over here, yeah, and a lot of it is as a a direct impact result from WRWR. We are seeing a lot of change going on. It will be slow, obviously, and a ripple takes quite a long time to get to the other side of the pond as well. So, but what I'm seeing is companies are reaching out to me to ask for advice on starting women's clothing lines. Companies are talking to women, they're getting their feedback. Companies are, the media is changing its attitude towards women riders. The media is starting to change its representation of women riders. So we're seeing less women in bikinis on bikes and more women riding bikes, and we're seeing more of a drive towards encouraging women into the industry as well. So for the UK and Europe, we are seeing the cogs start to turn and the pennies starting to drop with the industry, that actually there's a bit of a market here that has been a bit unsung about before, and actually there's opportunities here. So that's really good. I'm speaking with the likes of MCN, Europe's second biggest magazine for motorcycles. I'm speaking with the FIM, which is the Federation of International Motorcycle Racing. Basically, they cover all the racing. They're working with me to develop female magazines and sponsoring female young girls to get into riding, so that we've got them progressing through the racing ranks from an early age. There's all sorts going on.
If you want, I've got a few in Asia too, if you want.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's definitely changes starting. Is the world equal for women and men on motorcycles? Absolutely not. Is there still stuff that needs to be done? Absolutely yes. But are we seeing a positive change now? Yes. Yes, we are.
The change day after day, you know, it just takes time.
Exactly.
But, you know, if you don't start, you never go anywhere, right? It's about taking the first step, and
exactly.
Because I saw the change a little bit in representation here in Western countries. I must say in Asia, it's still, you know, I was looking for nice images of Asian women riders and so on. And it's so typical, you know, like I can't find any stock image of women actually riding, you know, they're just always half naked, and like it's very, very difficult to find. So when I saw that, I thought, yeah, I definitely experienced that too. So it's nice to see that at least in Western countries starts changing slowly, but it does start changing. Hopefully soon we can see very hot guys half naked on motorbikes.
That'd be great, wouldn't it?
So speaking of impact as well, so you made a bit of profits and you shared those profits with NGOs. So you selected, I think, nine non-profit organizations. And on one side, I was thinking, wow, nine is a lot. I mean, there are so many non-profits overall, and you know, sharing that with already 9 organizations. But then on the other side, I was also thinking, wow, but it's so little as well, because if those are the only organizations that encourage women in motorcycling, that's very little across the 100 countries. So I wanted to understand a bit more. I know that you uh, solicited the community, because I also shared some organizations with you and so on. So I know you solicited the community to have some names of organization, but I was curious to know a bit more about this process and how you finally decided, which organization, what were the criteria, and to sponsor, to give some money to.
I'm really glad that you asked that. And I'm really glad that I can explain this as well, because I think there's been a bit of language confusion as well, and translation confusion going on around the world. So we haven't picked 9 charities. We've actually picked, and I've got the sheet here, 86 charities. So what we've done is every single country that participated and had guardians within WRWR got to choose a charity to nominate to. Now, what was happening was ambassadors of the country were saying, I don't know, cancer research, give it to cancer research. We donated £10,000 to, well, actually a little bit over, but £10,000 approximately to charity with WRWR. Now, if you split that £10,000 by 86 countries, that's not a lot of money, and it's not going to make a difference to an organisation such as Cancer Research. As fantastic as the organisation is, we are women riders, and our group is dedicated to trying to better the industry. Yeah. So we thought, well, what better way than to give back to the industry itself, the one that is accepting us, the one that we want to improve. Yeah. And who else donates to female motorcyclists or the motorcycling community? Does somebody who doesn't ride a motorcycle donate to a motorcycle charity? Hell no. So it's only really bikers that donate to bikers, and we're a minority. There's not a lot of us. So guess what? Those biking charities don't get a lot of donations, and they struggle. So this is where we can actually make a real difference. So what we did was we split the charity money between each country, and I expressed that I really didn't want to donate to the likes of big organized charities. I wanted to donate to the motorcycling community, or sponsoring women into the motorcycling community, helping them with race sponsorship. So whether it's like tires, because that one woman, if we sponsor her some tires and she can actually go race, yeah, all the people that are watching her, she's affecting and she's influencing, and she's then inspiring others to do exactly the same. And all it is a set of tires. Yeah. So there's a much bigger impact from a smaller donation if you're doing it within the motorcycle industry. So what we did was, some of the countries didn't have or didn't really know of who to donate to, or you know, who they wanted the charity money to go to. And some of them similarly just wanted to donate to a different country, like the USA, for example. They specifically wanted their money to go through to South America, their sister country, you know, their neighbors. So any charity money that was not picked for an actual charity, where the country hadn't picked an actual charity, we put all that money into a pot, and that then got distributed across 9 top charities that we selected specifically, that we felt were fantastic for exactly what we wanted from this. So those top charities, for example, we had ESA. They build motorcycle ambulances for pregnant women in Africa. And if these women didn't have ESA's motorcycle ambulances, both them and their babies are likely to die in labour because they have to walk like incredible distances whilst in labour to get to any kind of medical aid. Imagine walking in labour in Africa on your own. So there's a fantastic example of a charity there. The other one is for example, in Argentina, we had 3 sisters that race enduro. Again, like really sort of unheard of in Argentina. Fantastic girls. They're absolutely kicking ass in the race scene. They're all sisters. They race together. They're doing an incredible job of inspiring women in the area to partake in racing and to take up motorcycling. So guess what we did? We sponsored their races. We gave them money to buy them new kit, and we gave them money to get themselves into the new races, because this all costs money. And their poor dad, their dad got them into bikes, and he's having to pay for all of them to do racing because they all want to do it. Yeah. And there's actually 5 of them in total, and they all ride. There's 1 brother and 4 sisters, and they all ride.
Says, what ideas did I have to encourage girls?
I know, but they're doing a fantastic job. So that's what we've actually done with the charity money. And ultimately, I've got to get round to it. As you know, I'm working 7 days a week, so I'm pretty limited with time. But ultimately, I'll be putting all of the charities on the website. I'll show you actually, because you can see here. So these are all the charities that we have. So there is absolutely.
But all the charities, as you said, they are not all motorcycle related. So you picked the last those charities, but not necessarily motorcycle related. Do you know any percentage, like those 9 that you selected, were they the only one motorcycle related, or what was the percentage?
The 9 that we selected are all motorcycle related. And I would say,
do you have any other that were motorcycle related out of those 86?
Out of the 86, I would say between 85 and 95% are motorcycle related.
Okay. So actually there are a lot. Okay, that's great. Oh yeah.
Directly or indirectly. So for example, we have like in Australia, we sponsored the air ambulances. Obviously, it's not a motorcycle, but it saves motorcyclists. So it's directly or indirectly. It's about 95% motorcycle related. Yeah.
Okay, that's amazing. So
cool.
Tell me, I have 3 more questions. Let's try to be a bit short. I know it's difficult because it's topics we could discuss for ages. Okay, my first, maybe the 2 I have left are a bit more related. I wanted to ask you, what were your plans and projects? So I know that you plan to have a motorcycle riding school. So I wanted to have a bit of idea of what were the plans now, even though it's a bit difficult as well with the COVID situation to have really long-term plan, but maybe a bit more focus on WRWR 2022. So I know that you were planning to do it in 3 years after 2019, so that would fall on 2022. Is it still in the plan? And what would you do differently? Like a bit of outlook on, what would you do differently and what's planned for 2022?
So we don't know yet. 2022, it wouldn't be happening in because of the COVID situation. We can't do anything about that. We need it for an international motorcycle relay. We need to get across borders easily, and people need to be jabbed up. Every country needs to be okay and back to normal. I mean, for example, are we just going to skip India? We can't do that. We need to include everybody. So we need to get back to normality before we can then say there's going to be another relay on. There will be another relay, but we don't know what year until we know when the world's back to normal. So in terms of your question, what I'm doing sort of personally, Yeah, absolutely. So looking to ultimately, when the UK is back to normal, set up a riding school. I really enjoyed it. I spoke with you before about the USA and just teaching the girls that were like a bit anxious and everything. And I'm also a windsurfing instructor by trade previously. And that's how I used to travel, is I used to go from country to country teaching windsurfing and English. So I love to teach. I love to share knowledge with people. So that was a natural sort of avenue for me. But also, what I really want to do is get the younger generation accustomed to being to seeing women on motorbikes as being a normal thing. So I'm starting to write some children's books that are about a little girl who has a rusty magic motorbike. It's called Musty the Rusty Motorbike. And she goes on all these wild and wacky magical adventures with her hunk of junk that she picks up from the store that nobody else wants. And just trying to normalize the fact that it's okay for women or little girls to be interested in motorcycles, and to give them options outside of dolls and makeup and hair that is a normal thing. So that's something that I'm working on externally as well, which I love doing that, because I'm a big kid as well, so I love writing it. So I'm like, oh, and then we did this and we did this. And
that's amazing. That's such an amazing initiative, seriously, because it's true. It's about representation. It's about, I see even some women here I teach that are not from Malaysia, even from Western countries, the Spanish or French, they thought, oh no, I never thought I could ride. I was like, why? You do lots of many things. Why did you ever think you could ride a big bike, you know? So yeah, representation, inspiration, that's really, really, really important. And
exactly.
so speaking of inspiration as well, and Jack, so my last questions, I would like to circle back in a way to what you said earlier, that there were so many challenges, that every single day you wanted to stop and it looked like it was impossible. And still, you overcame those challenges. And there are many women out there and girls for whom riding a bike is a huge challenge. To overcome the family constraints, the societal constraint, the money constraint, the physical constraint. It's a huge challenge. So what would you like to tell those girls? What drove you to overcome all those challenges? So they're different, but you know, it's perspective, right? So, and what drove you to go over all those things that seemed impossible? Because I know many girls here who think it's impossible. What would you tell them?
You've got such good questions, Alison. That's a really good question to ask. And you're right. The thing for me, honestly, that drove me to overcome the challenges with the team, because remember, it wasn't me, it was all of us together that made this happen. God, I could never do this on my own, ever. It's impossible. But the thing that really did drive me was I've always had a inner burning desire to make something of my life. I'm not put on this earth to just exist. I needed to make a difference, and I needed to help and to make things better, and to feel like I was here for a reason. So if you're facing a challenge, that there's a little life quote that I live by. I have to, because otherwise I'm letting myself down, and I can't deal with the responsibility of myself on my own shoulders, because it's a bit, because I'll tell myself off a lot. And the saying is, a ship in the harbour is safe, but that's not why ships are built. And that is such a true quote, and it's one that's been with me all my life. And yeah, you can sit at home and you can wonder what if all you like, and everybody can do that, but the open ocean is where you will actually discover yourself and what life is for, and what living actually means.
Well, that's an amazing and perfect way to close this interview that I'd love to pursue and I'd love to connect again, but I know you're super busy. So, yeah, let's keep in touch for sure, like with all the women that I love to interview. And thanks so much for those beautiful words and great inspiration and for having created WRWR because I agree with you. I think the ripple effect is still to come.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Alison. It's been an absolutely brilliant interview. I've loved talking to you.
Great. Speak soon. Have a great day.
Ciao.
Bye.